You really missed a huge secret. Today, let's not talk about vague religious myths. Instead, we'll use the toughest geological evidence and modern cutting-edge fluid mechanics data to unravel this severely underestimated prehistoric survival story. Not only that, at the end of the film, I also want to reveal to you an ultimate escape code that has been hidden for thousands of years. This code will be the strongest life-saving talisman for you and me to protect our families from being swallowed up by the tide of the times in this crazy world of uncontrolled inflation and frequent black swans. This is definitely a truth decryption that subverts your values. Without further ado, the piercing national level alarm echoed throughout the city, and the sky changed from clear to deathly dark in a few seconds. Do you think this is another promotion for a Hollywood disaster movie? No. This is a real pain point that happened. The news anchor trembled as they reported that the volcanoes beneath the sea were erupting simultaneously, and a tsunami several thousand meters high was rushing towards the east and west coasts of the United States. At the speed of a high-speed train, there are no shelters, no escape pods, and even in the face of such devastating despair, the technology that modern people take pride in cannot even buy a second of survival. But what if I told you today that this seemingly exaggerated global extinction had actually happened a long time ago? What is even more reversed is that today you and I can still sit here breathing and watching this movie, all because in that ancient time without electricity or heavy machinery, there was a 600-year-old grandfather who was ridiculed by all mankind as crazy. He spent 120 years building a rectangular giant wooden box in the inland with... Today, I don't just need to reveal the amazing scientific evidence hidden in the mountains of Tafekii to prove that this is not a bedside story. I also want to tell you at the end of the film how this ancient survival guide will become the ultimate password for you and me to protect our families in today's world of economic turmoil and frequent natural disasters. This is a life-saving truth that you absolutely cannot miss. Please make sure to see the end. Hello everyone. When it comes to Noah's Ark, many people's first reaction may be, oh I know. It is that fairy tale story. Giraffes and elephants lined up and walked into a cute wooden boat. Everyone, if you still have this impression, then you have really been deceived by children's picture books too badly. This is not a myth. It is a cruel and scientifically rigorous global geological disaster. In order to help everyone see the truth clearly, today we will not talk about vague religious terms. Instead, we will use scientific evidence, geological cases, and rigorous logic to reconstruct the most shocking post-apocalyptic survival story in human history. Suitable for all of you who have independent thinking ability, are working hard for life, and want to protect your family. Let's turn back. What kind of world is that? The Bible describes humanity at that time as thinking evil all day long. This sentence sounds abstract, but if you use the logic of modern society to bring it in, it is a society where morality is completely destroyed. Violence is rampant. There is no legal bottom line, no respect for life, and people are full of calculation and plunder. God looked at all of this and felt extremely sad and disappointed, so he decided to press the reset button on earth. But in this desperate darkness, Noah is not a superhero. He is just an honest person who still adheres to kindness, bottom line, and reverence for the Creator in that corrupt era. God told Noah that a great flood that would destroy the world was about to come, and gave him an extremely precise blueprint. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first terrifying scientific observation. The dimensions God gave Noah were length of 300 elbows, width of 50 elbows, and height of 30 elbows. In modern metric terms, this ark is approximately 137 meters long, 23 meters wide, and 14 meters high, with a volume equivalent to nearly 600 standard train carriages. What is the most amazing thing? Its aspect ratio is exact. Decades ago, South Korea's world-class shipbuilding research center, KRISO, conducted rigorous fluid dynamics tests on the dimensions of the Noah's Ark. They put the scale model of the Ark into a wave-making pool simulating huge waves, and the results surprised all the top engineers. This 6:1 aspect ratio is actually the golden ratio that can maintain the balance of the hull in strong winds and waves, and is the least likely to capsize. It can withstand towering waves of over 30 meters without capsizing. you should know that the design purpose of the ark is not for navigation. It has no sails, no oars, and no power system. Its only purpose is to float and survive in the apocalyptic. How could an ancient person from thousands of years ago possibly understand modern cutting-edge fluid mechanics and ship engineering? This itself is a scientific miracle that cannot be explained by common sense. When Noah and his family of 8 started building this super beast inland, you can imagine how the people around him looked at him. Every day, people pass by and mock him, saying, "Old man, are you crazy? This place is so far from the sea. Why are you building such a big boat? It won't rain at all. Are you mentally ill? Isn't this like us now?" If someone sells all their property, builds an air raid shelter in the desert, and tells you that the world will end tomorrow, what would you think? This is the biggest pain point of human nature. We always believe only in what we can see in front of us, and are filled with arrogance and ignorance towards unknown disasters. But Noah did not. He endured more than a century of loneliness and bullying, building this life-saving vehicle one axe at a time. Because he knows that the truth is often in the hands of a few people, and preparing in advance is the only way out when disaster strikes. Finally, that day has come. The description in Genesis of the Bible is very precise, even with strong geological features. The springs of the great abyss have cracked open, and the windows of heaven have opened. Everyone, please pay attention to the wording here. The Great Flood is not just... In modern geology, this perfectly corresponds to the theory of catastrophic plate tectonics. You can imagine that the plates of the Earth suddenly break under intense movement, and the high-temperature underground water vein hidden in the deep crust erupts at supersonic speed, rushes into tens of thousands of meters high, and then turns into rainstorm and pours down. At the same time, a large-scale eruption of underwater volcanoes triggered a global super tsunami. This is not a gradual change, it is an instant geological disaster. At this point, someone will definitely ask, "This sounds too sci-fi, is there any scientific evidence?" This is our focus today. Firstly, let's take a look at the geological strata around the world. Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon in the United States? The magnificent canyon that stretches over 1,000 meters deep, according to traditional textbooks, was slowly carved out by the Colorado River over millions of years. However, an increasing number of geologists have discovered that this statement is full of loopholes. If it is slowly deposited and cut layer by layer, there should be many traces of biological activity and weathering at the boundary of the rock layers. But no. The rock layers of the Grand Canyon are as smooth as a giant knife cutting in an instant, with almost no time interval between the erosion surfaces of the rock layers. What does this prove? This proves that these sedimentary rocks, which are several thousand meters thick, were rapidly deposited in a very short period of time during a super flood filled with sediment. Let's take another modern case that shocked the scientific community, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington. This real disaster provided a perfect modern laboratory for flood modeling. After the volcanic eruption triggered a huge mudslide, guess what? In just a few days, the mudslide washed out a small Grand Canyon that was as deep as 40 meters, leaving clear layers of sedimentary textures on the rock wall. It looked like it had gone through millions of years, but in reality, it only took a few days. The case of Mount St. Helens tells us with irrefutable evidence that the formation of geological landscapes does not require a long time, only a sufficiently massive disaster. This perfectly confirms the scientific rationality of the Great Flood changing the face of the Earth in just a few months. There is another more direct evidence: fossils. How were fossils formed? If an animal dies on the roadside and is left unattended, it will be eaten by scavengers or decomposed by microorganisms within a few days, and it is impossible for it to become a fossil. The only condition for fossil formation is that organisms must be instantly buried by a large amount of sediment at the moment they are alive or just dead, isolating them from oxygen. Many of the dinosaur fossils and fish fossils we have excavated around the world now exhibit extremely distorted and struggling postures, and even have fossils frozen in the moment when large fish are swallowing small fish. What does this mean? This indicates that there was an unprecedented and massive flood filled with sediment, which instantly submerged the global ecosystem. Even more exaggerated is that scientists have discovered a large number of marine fossils at the highest point on Earth, the summit of Mount Everest in the Himalayas. The traditional scientific explanation is that it was slowly uplifted by plate compression. But these fossils are so well preserved that they even contain fragile shellfish. A more reasonable explanation is that this mountain was once completely submerged by the deep sea and was quickly pushed up during. Speaking of which, a logically clear audience may throw out the most classic question. Well, even if there is a great flood, how could Noah's Ark accommodate all the animals in the world? That is millions of species. How can we solve eating, drinking, defecating? This is illogical. This involves the concept of taxonomy in modern biology. The Bible says that God allowed animals to enter the ark each according to its kind. This kind does not equal the modern biological definition of species. For example, dogs, wolves, foxes, and coyotes are classified into different species in modern times. But in their genetic ancestors, they all belong to the same class of the canine family. Noah doesn't need to bring a pair of chihuahuas, huskies, or golden retrievers. He just needs to bring a pair of canine ancestors with a rich gene pool. After the Great Flood, these ancestors reproduced and appeared in a variety of dog breeds through microevolution and geographical isolation. There is a very rigorous scholar in the United States, John Woodmorappe, who devoted great effort to writing a book called Noah's Ark: A Feasibility Study. He calculated in detail the classes of all known terrestrial animals and birds in history, and found that most of these animals are not large in size. If they were large animals such as dinosaurs, Noah could have brought juveniles or subadults, which not only saves space and eats less, but also has a longer lifespan for reproduction after a major flood. Woodmorappe calculated that these 16,000 animals, along with their annual food and water supply, only need to occupy about half of the space on the ark. The remaining space is enough for Noah's family of 8 to live in and serve as an activity area. What about animal excrement and feeding issues? Everyone. Don't underestimate the wisdom of the ancients. The ark has 3 layers, and gravity chutes can be designed inside to concentrate excrement into the bottom layer, or directly discharge it outside the ship. As for feeding, modern biological research has shown that many animals enter a state of hibernation or dormancy when they encounter environmental changes, darkness, or enclosed spaces. The interior of the ark is dimly lit, and with the swaying of the hull, most animals may be in a state of extremely low metabolism and drowsiness, greatly reducing their need for food and excretion, and allowing Noah's family of 8 to have enough energy to take care of them. All of this is complete. At the moment when the door of the ark was closed by God's own hands, the outside world fell into an endless purgatory. You can imagine those who once ridiculed Noah when scorching groundwater gushed out and a tsunami swept in. They crazily pounded the wooden door of the ark. This is an extremely heavy and real pain point. Once the door of opportunity closes, it will never open again. The ark floated in strong winds and huge waves for 5 months, during which the face of the earth underwent a complete reshaping, with mountains being lifted and the deep sea sinking. This leads to another astonishing archaeological mystery. For hundreds of years, countless explorers, scientists, and even military spy satellites have been searching for the remains of the Ark in the Alara Mountains in eastern Tefekai. The most famous case among them is the Dura. This is a huge ship-shaped landform discovered near Mount Ararat, with a length of approximately 150 meters, which astonishingly matches the size of the Ark recorded in the Bible. What is even more shocking is that scientists used ground-penetrating radar to scan this area and found regular grid-like structures underground that resemble ship ribs. Although there is still controversy in the academic community, the highly artificial architectural features exhibited at this location still make it difficult for many geologists and archaeologists to explain them using natural phenomena. What is even more interesting is human cultural memory. If you study ancient civilizations around the world, you will find a chilling coincidence, whether it is China's Infeiwa Mendes the Sky, and Yu the Great's flood control, Babylon's Epic of Gilgamesh, ancient legends of North American Indians, or even the Inca civilization in South America and the indigenous myths in Australia. There are over 200 ancient legends of different ethnic groups around the world that record the same event, a global catastrophic flood caused by human degradation, and a family saving the bloodline of animals and... Ladies and gentlemen, if this is just a localized flood in the Middle East, how could it become a shared historical memory of the world in ancient times when transportation was cut off? The only scientific explanation is that all of us humans today are descendants of the survivors of that global disaster. Our ancestors passed down this life and death real event from generation to generation. And although the details have changed over time, the core story is surprisingly consistent. Speaking of which, let's bring time back to the present. Why do we spend so much time analyzing an ancient... Ladies and gentlemen, this is the key point I want to tell you today. And it is also the value of this film in changing your thinking. The story of the Great Flood and Noah's Ark is not meant to intimidate us, but rather a guide to survival full of wisdom and hope. Take a look at our current world. Although we have not faced a physical flood, we are facing various forms of modern floods. The sudden global epidemic instantly paralyzed our lives. Inflation and economic crisis are devouring our hard-earned wealth. Like a tsunami, isn't the decline of social morality, the proliferation of false information, and the indifference of interpersonal relationships another kind of flood that overwhelms our souls? In such an era, each of us needs to become the Noah of our own lives. What is our ark? The ark is not a wooden boat. It is the protective net you built for the people you love. Firstly, we need the wisdom of preparing in advance. Noah started building ships on clear days and endured ridicule. Should we also prepare emergency reserves for our families when the economy is relatively stable now? Should we develop good lifestyle habits and buy sufficient medical insurance while our bodies are still healthy? When people around you are pursuing short-term pleasure and overdrawing the future, if you choose to plan ahead and live within your means, you may be laughed at for being too conservative and boring. But please remember Noah's loneliness. When disaster truly strikes, your preparation will be the only safe haven for your family. Secondly, the ark represents holding the bottom line in that era, full of corruption. Noah did not follow the crowd. In today's workplace and society, things that stop at nothing for the sake of profit happen every day. Can we maintain a heart of integrity, kindness, and reverence, like Noah? This is actually a kind of altruistic thinking. When you persist in doing the right thing, providing valuable services, and treating others sincerely, you are actually injecting a clear stream into this malicious world. You are building a moral ark for your community and the next generation. A selfish and self-centered person will only be pushed into the water by those around them when a storm comes, and a person with altruistic heart, everyone will be willing to work together with him. Finally, Ark is a story about redemption and hope. Although the Great Flood destroyed the old world, the moment when Noah released the dove and brought back the olive branch, it represented rebirth and peace. God has placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign of the covenant that will no longer destroy all mankind with floods. This tells us that no matter how terrifying the personal flood you are currently experiencing may be due to your recent career failure, emotional betrayal, or health crisis, feeling like you are about to be overwhelmed by despair, please believe that the storm will eventually pass and the flood will retreat. As long as you hold on to your inner ark in the midst of disaster, protect your faith, your family, and your conscience. When the sun pierces through the clouds again, you will surely see your own rainbow. Today, through a scientific perspective, geological evidence, and biological logic, we have re-evaluated the shocking history of Noah's Ark. It proves the insignificance of humanity, but also demonstrates the great power of being prepared and steadfast in faith. I hope today's content can bring you different inspiration so that you will no longer be afraid when facing any future challenges, because you already know how to build an indestructible ark of life for yourself and your family. If you think this video is helpful to you, please be sure to share it with the people you care about. Perhaps one of your